I am going to talk to you tonight about opportunities and strategies for women who want to go global. This particular presentation on behalf of 3-Day Startup is influenced to a degree by a lot of events that are going on today in the world, and you'll see why. And as I thought about going global from a very different perspective now because of world events, I realized that I was born global. Let's say I went global about 4 years after startup. So despite the migration of about 3 million people from East Germany between 1949 and 1961, despite assurances that there would be no hard border between East and West Germany, the GDR wanted to put a stop to what they claimed was the West's desire to take back territory. So in August of 1961, soldiers in East Germany cut the city in half with some 25 to 30 miles of barbed wire, stopping the flow of East Germans to the West. On October 25th of 1961, American and Soviet tanks faced each other at what we know today and refer to as Checkpoint Charlie. And for some 16 hours, the world held its breath in fear of yet another war in Europe. My father was a pediatrician practicing in Evanston, Illinois. He had served in the Army Air Corps, for about 3 years in Germany, just 10 years previous to that. And he had settled down to his practice in these Chicago suburbs. But it seemed that in 1961, at the end of that year, Uncle Sam had other plans. And in January of 1962, my mother and my father and 5 of us children, myself included there at about age 4, headed out of the Chicago area to Tripoli, Libya. And my father's remit as a doctor to care for the families of American and some British service personnel as the US flew humanitarian services into Berlin and East Germany. As a 4-year-old, I didn't know why we lived in North Africa, and it wasn't until my first visit to Berlin in 2003, 14 years after the fall of the wall, and 1 year before the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, that I understood more fully the implications of my having gone global at age 4. I didn't witness the airlifts and the executions. Instead, I thrived in a modern city, Tripoli, Libya, along the sea full of orange groves and beaches, camels, lots of cats. I was exposed to new languages, cultures, customs, and people. And it jettisoned me into this marvelous life, exposed me to countries all over the world for the rest of my life. Going global, in a sense, is not just, setting up NGOs, though, in times of crisis, right? And it's not always finding out new ways to deliver water or electricity to emerging nations. But what I did realize as I prepared this address is that the global cost of conflicts is about $100 billion per conflict, dishing charity cash and sleeping bags to these regions, according to Fast Company, October 2010, doesn't change very much. It's helpful. But what's important is that it introduces innovation and business skills to the local economy. That introduction of innovation and business to the local economy can change a lot. Entrepreneurship, when efficiently deployed, can be dynamic for growth and long-term renovation. It has the potential to boost economic recovery while improving access to basic services. This one, as you see, this quotation comes from Mina Bites and written with regard to the Syrian conflict by Ahmad Sufyan Bayram just 3 years ago. Conflict And need for renovation and a return from economic distress comes in many forms, including a pandemic. So as we see from last March, this time a year ago, Australia was written about also by McKinsey and Company, saying as lockdowns rolled around Australia, the single focus, fail fast, fix early approach, delegated problem solving, and an agile mindset suddenly played out in teams, businesses, and homes everywhere. And in this past year, meaning 2020 and up to August and October, what am I saying, March of 2021 and continuing, made Australia, for example, a nation of startups. Congratulations all. And it's really worked. All of this stuff can be scary. Conflict is scary. Going global is somewhat scary. And I thought I'd use this particular slide to explain really that despite daunting things in life, nothing needs to be feared. It needs to be understood, and action can come out of understanding. So this talk tonight is about mitigating some of the fears that you may have about going global if you've thought about it, considering why you might want to go global, and offer a few tips and ideas where to look, how to research the prospects to have a more successful venture abroad. International business in general means stepping over your country's borders to conduct business. Stepping over borders means entering unknown territory often. Countries, those to which you may travel, want to transform their own entrepreneurial landscapes by attracting global founders. That's you. They want you. It doesn't have to be scary if you're going to a place where you're wanted. One of the themes for this Women's Entrepreneurship Summit has to do with being active and then amplifying and advancing. McKinsey, in another report directed towards the Eastern Hemisphere of this globe, wrote in October of this last year that the best way in which companies can emerge from a downturn sets the tone, the amplification, if you will, for their performance, that advancement, over the following decade. What you do now is impactful for the next 10 years. I'd like to share with you just a quick video from Abigail Forsyth. She's the managing director at Keep Cup, a startup out of Australia that has recently gone global. Some of you may be familiar with it.
My name's Abigail Forsyth. I'm the managing director of Keep Cup, and we make the first barista standard reusable cup. Our mission is to globally reduce reliance on disposable cups. Over 1 million disposable cups go to landfill every minute around the world. So it's a big job and it's a global job. At Keep Cup, we say we're from Australia with love. The product began wholly made in Australia, and most of it is. As we've expanded across the globe, we now have these individual pick and pack locations in the UK and the US, which means there's a local labour content which enhances that sustainability story as we grow. Our export journey began virtually the day we started selling Keep Cups. So the first market we did, someone blogged about it on an American site, and we sold 10 cups in America that afternoon. So when you have a niche product, the world comes to you, and you can either, it's not a case of deciding where to export, it's a case of saying no. EMDG has been invaluable to us, and it recognises, I think, that getting into new markets requires sustained effort over a long period of time, and it's been enormously fantastic to have the support of the Australian government to expand our business this way. The EMDG grant provides you with a discipline in how you approach marketing in new markets, because often your distribution partners will ask for free product and imposes the discipline where you say, no, we need to see what that marketing activity is doing, what it actually costs, and you can measure your ROI in a much more effective way. Through our success and the support of the EMDG grant, we have now got distribution hubs in Los Angeles and the UK, which support our sustainable credentials, and it means we can now export to 65 countries around the world.
So blogging the day you open and being discovered across the world in the United States an order for 10 cups that ultimately amplified to 65 countries around the world, but not alone, with the help of the Australian government, with EMDG grants that were available in Australia. And grants like these and government offices like these are available all around the world to help those who want to go global. I thought about a process that you can use as well to help you iterate and reiterate this amplification and advancement by listening, whether you hear me or mentors, friends, people who've done it before, Abigail. You listen, you live. And in your living, you're aware of your surroundings and opportunities. You act on those. You face your fears. You run into problems and you love your problems. You seek solutions, and then you listen again to see if what you think are the solutions are really working for you. What we call customer discovery is listening, living, acting, facing your fears, loving the problems, and seeking again. And that will take you not just in circles, but forward. I thought it might be interesting for you to know that when you go to other countries, especially the United States, you might be surprised to know that 40 to 50% of new entrepreneurs, all new entrepreneurs between 2007 and 2019 in the United States, are immigrants. The US is a country of immigrants, but if you look at this graph and see the percentage of native-born Americans, those in second, third, fourth generations, do not make up a high percentage of new entrepreneurs. The immigrants are the founders. Among those at the top are Indian immigrants, Canadians, Brits, Israelis, Germans, Chinese, French, Irish, and many other countries. The time required to start a business in the Asian Pacific region, where many of you are listening tonight, is kind of interesting, but it becomes important in your research right away to say, how long does it take to start up a business? And what does it mean if it is a very short time? You notice that within the Asian Pacific, coming down to a half day. In New Zealand, well done, New Zealand, and Australia, 2 days. Sometimes it can be in a matter of hours. Lots of books available to help you. Take a look at those. This is material coming from the World Bank, and the World Bank is an excellent source for understanding how to do business in other parts of the world. In the United States, you can't look at just how many days in the US. You have to look state by state, city by city. That's a little bit more daunting, but it's important in looking for relevant, obtainable markets, even when you're going online, and where you may be blogging and where you may be seen is relevant. So unfortunately, just now for Little Rock, Arkansas, looking at over 60 days to start a business, there seems to be some entanglement within the bureaucracies there. The source for this, Arizona State University, is very good now. They've taken the place to a degree of newer data. They've taken the place of World Bank, who is revamping its doing business insights that they've been doing for many years. And so right now you can turn to research done at Arizona State University for some of this data, not only in the United States, but globally. Startup rates worldwide change. Chile is at the top of this, and I'm showing this slide, and some of you may be aware of the fact that Startup Chile, begun now over 15 years ago, has been a proactive visa opportunity for people to go in and start their companies in Chile with a great deal of support from the government to boost their economy. And as a result, one of the top startup nations in the world. So researching the global market is important. For those of you who might be academics like I am and research, or many of my students, and especially over in engineering and biotechnology, if you're a doctor, if you've never finished college or you've studied literature or history and you're thinking, how do I do this? You might be a good researcher. Researching to go global is the same as comparative analyses. And you use robust quantitative and qualitative empirical data, and the data will tell you what to do. So I thought I'd give you this quick little slide here to look, and For those of you used to traditional academic research, an abstract is your executive summary. A research question, the problem you want to solve in your business. A hypothesis really is your business concept and all the assumptions you're making that you need to prove that you're right. Gee, I think this is really going to sell well. You got to find out how you know that. Literature reviews, all the stuff that you're reading in your secondary literature reviews, that's called an industry and market competition analysis. You want to do that for a business plan before you go abroad. Your methodology is primary. You're talking to people, doing surveys. You're doing what 3-Day Startup will tell you, get out of the building. The D School in Stanford tells people, get out of the building. Your secondary are the books and literature and the statistics that you find. And then the research on top of the research, the tertiary, people who can talk about the secondary research with some level of information that'll help you. Outcomes and implications, well, that's back to customer demand and the impact of your business. And then you want to do these strength, weakness, opportunity and threat types of analyses to make sure that when you start doing marketing and sales strategies and kick off your business, that you're well prepared. So if you meet all your aims and objectives and you do this on a global scale as a comparative analysis, you'll have a lot of data from which to work. And then you go to the organizations like the Australian government, the Singaporean government, the Japanese government like JETRO, and you also go to business incubators and to organizations like 3-Day Startup that'll help you with getting that business off the ground. So we're thinking, what questions do I ask then? For going global, you ask the same questions any founder needs to ask. Will my product or service sell? Does the target market know or care about my product or service? And in this case, do the culture, economy, and politics of a host country appeal to me? There are a lot of unknowns. Risks are really important when you're going global. And every country has risks, not necessarily like an international conflict, but risks that may have financial implications to you if you don't understand regulations and tax regimes and the culture and language and currency. And you want to know enough about these things to see what's ahead. I had mentioned that the World Bank is changing their doing business as. This is a little illustration that shows you that they are doing something that's going to be business enabling environment. So watch for that. It should be up about now, but it's not there yet, but it's coming. What you maybe should expect as you go global, mentor whiplash. Again, a favorite 3DS term. When you're talking to a lot of people and getting advice, some of that advice may conflict. Or you think it conflicts and it actually doesn't. You just need more information. You find out that you're hearing two different perspectives about perhaps the same phenomenon. You want to expect many offers to assist and to attract your business. Be careful, but just keep listening. You should expect cultural differences even in seemingly similar places. You may say, I just want to do business and not worry about language, so I'm going to go where they speak English. Well, Englishes are very different, and cultures within English-speaking countries are very different. You should expect to spend lots of time on research and never end. After you start a business, it doesn't matter if you're 5 years, 10 years, 15 years old, or 50 years old, you continue researching and staying ahead of the curve and understanding your competition and the trends ahead to make adjustments to compete in the market. You should expect problems. You want to love those and solve those. Things to avoid. Don't follow advice too quickly. Don't chase too many options. Avoid assuming that the rest of the world should operate as you do. You'll be very disappointed. You should avoid spending money instead of using good public support services, at least in the beginning. At some point, you're going to want to put down a little money for some legal services. And if you're getting the sense that you aren't getting the best expertise from free public services, pay for what you need until you feel comfortable about the decisions you're making. but avoid rushing into any agreements. Partners, especially abroad, people who say, oh, I can represent you, be careful, don't rush. And avoid locating in a new country that has what's known as weak insolvency resolution. That's a big one. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but basically, that's if you find out you can't pay your bills, your cash flow is low. There are some countries that culturally practice what we were accustomed to 150 years ago in many Western nations, UK and even the US, of debtor's prison. There are places where it's a criminal act to be in debt for more than 60, 90 days, and you might want to avoid those particular opportunities. You should keep your options open. Going global means, to a degree, exporting, being in countries with never leaving your desk or your computer. It could mean importing in order to test relationships before you step abroad and open an office. It might mean partnerships, different kinds of strategic alliances. You might ultimately want to open a wholly owned subsidiary in another country. You might want to franchise a business that you've started and take it abroad. To screen markets and sites, there are some general tips that are provided by all international business site selection experts, consultants, as well as textbooks. You want to look at the climate, both the weather as well as the business environment, access to materials, raw materials, your labor, finance opportunities. Where do you get funds and loans? What does that look like? You want to look at the cultural, economic, political, and infrastructural environments, right? Does the water run? Is there electricity? Potential markets and accessibility. So even within countries, you're looking at the markets, the demographics, the same thing you do in your own country, but with a slightly higher level of complexity. And then, of course, you need to visit the locations and analyze the competition. Can you sell keep cups from Australia without visiting the 65 countries? Absolutely, especially with online businesses. That's not a problem. But at some point, really understanding your market, especially if you want to set up any kind of offices abroad or establish strategic alliances and partnerships, go and visit. So there are benefits to exporting. I have a photo here that I really, really love, a program called Ireland's Starticus program. It's set up for exporting founders between the ages of 18 and 30. It's fantastic. If it doesn't exist in your country, maybe help create it, but look for opportunities like this. If you export, you can increase your productivity, of course, and increase sales and profits, get new customers and better growth prospects. Here are just a few connections that you have that you can look at, and once you see these, you say, what's the equivalent in another country? In Australia, Women in Export is an excellent site to look at. I'm not going to click on these, but the slides are available for you to look at as well. In the United States, Export.gov is an excellent site, and you'll see that it also has reports on individual countries, so that it's useful for another country coming into the US and for United States business people wanting to go global, entrepreneurs wanting to go global. JETRO is the Japan External Trade Organization, the Trade Commission in Canada, wonderful site. Austrade, terrific site. Mentoring opportunities now, if you click on Empower Queensland, is an activity I'm currently involved in via an organization called the Entrepreneur Futures Network out of Silicon Valley. So going global is often foreign direct investment, and especially if you're investing more than 15 to 20% of the market value of a company in some form or another in another country, you have committed foreign direct investment. And the top three concerns for anybody in that sense going global, whether you're a startup, you're a new company, you're medium sized, you're a large corporation setting up a division, you're worried about labor and labor costs, corporate taxes, and the market size. And you want to find out about subsidies that can support your business in some way, long-term corporate tax rates once you're making enough money that you have to pay taxes. And again, there's that bankruptcy and how do you get through that process? A couple of companies in Australia that have gone global very successfully. Canva, many of you may know about. And the reason I illustrate them is not only is it a very global company, it's also reflecting changes that besides labor and taxation and different kinds of insolvency resolutions, the changing workplace, the tight workplace, the difficulty even in hiring individuals right now around the world because of COVID, because of vast numbers of early retirements, and because of people sitting behind screens like this one today. Some of these companies are realizing that a flexible work policy can work and even works better within this global environment. At Canva now, starting this year, employees only have to come into the office 8 times a year. At Atlassian, with 5,700 global employees now, they have to meet in conferences at least 4 times a year. Attached to that, and the retirement gives you some ideas for going global that you might want to pay attention to. In January of this year, the American Association of Retired Persons reported that 34% of retirees have actually considered going back to work because of the job opportunities that are now available. And as of this last 2 months ago, 1 in 5, 20%, say past employers have asked them to return because of the labor shortage. That has huge implications for those of you going global. What is the age of the average startup founder in the United States? This one may surprise you. From just 3 years ago, you see what's happening here? 40 to 49, the average age of a startup. And the question by Azoulay et al. In Harvard Business Review is, why is so much venture capital being thrown at university students? The question is interesting. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about going global. Soft landings are the key, I believe, to going global. It means that the business innovation centers, business incubators, accelerators, all of these places that are built into municipalities that are designed to serve at little or no cost startup companies, entrepreneurs, are also more and more familiar with now a more than 25-year-old concept called soft landings. And co-working spaces, those are the incubators and these startup warm fuzzy places to grow and get the support you need at little or no cost. So 3-Day Startup is involved in this kind of activity, especially in Austin, Texas. The International Business Innovation Association, the European Business Network, IPAs, it's not a beer, investment promotion agencies, economic development offices, all will help you find a place to go to start your business and to get the support you need around the world. And all of these centers are very similar. They offer translation services, language training, domestic market research, access to capital and investors, intellectual property protection assistance. They'll help you meet government regulations with import and export laws and patent assistance. They'll help you obtain business and driver's licenses. Oh, that's tricky. Took me 7 years in Sweden. Cultural training, immigration and visa assistance, and housing assistance. Use these services. Here's the Export.gov site for the United States, and you can see just a plethora of opportunities for you and people to talk to you and contacts and phone calls. People are just really desperate to help you. In Japan, I mentioned Jetro. These are their offices and where they're located throughout the world. You reach out if you're interested in doing business with Japan and finding out, what is that like? Do I want to live in Japan? Do I want to sell to Japan? Today, as you heard even from the video that I just showed, your customers come to you as well, especially if you're out there blogging and you have a strong digital marketing presence. So if you're doing search engine optimization, you want to make sure that your website, that your Shopify, whatever you're using to get out in the market, you want to be on that first or second page of a search. And if you don't know how to do that, do talk to an expert who can help optimize your search system. You want to utilize influencers. You want to figure out, how does word of mouth work? How do people boost in social media? Blogging works. video blogging or vlogging, stories, podcasts, social media of all kinds, and mediating and regulating your reputation. So go global, right? Here's a picture of the 3-day startup working space. Notice here in Canada, City of Brampton has an incubator for international startups. You can explore markets, talk to export and trade experts, check out the incubator world and soft landing opportunities, evaluate the wholesale pitches. Be careful of that because of course they want you, so compare them. Don't act too soon. Write your business plan strategy to go global from the very start. There's some researching options, and I'll give you just a couple of links here, things to think about. If you've got a product, not a service, but a product, you need to familiarize yourself with harmonized tariff codes. 98% of internationally traded goods across 200 countries rely on this system of coding so that you know if you're paying tariffs, import tariffs, if there are barriers in your countries, non-tariff barriers, embargoes, all kinds of things that you want to look at. 99 chapters, it's a hefty product, but you can find it in a PDF form online with very little problem, and you can find it if you click on this link. You want to explore markets within free trade agreement portals in your own country. Find out who the free trade agreement countries are within blocks, such as the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, and the European Union, and ASEAN across the Asian Pacific countries, because there you also have opportunities. And then find out what countries in those trading blocks are trading out beyond the world and other places to capitalize on lower or no tariffs for importing and exporting. Take a look at the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the OECD, and for intellectual property questions, learn how to search certainly for patents, trademarks, and copyrights, especially when it comes to naming your company, but you can also go to the World Intellectual Property site at WIPO. Few soft landing locations that I can recommend. You look at these, you'll get the idea, and you can find others. You can reach out to me or reach out to 3-day Startup and to others, but Startup Chile is a great model. Parallel 18 is similar to that in Puerto Rico, Capital Factory in Austin, Texas, Startup Island in Taipei, amazing new product. And we've watched WeWork, those of you who might be watching, go up and down and different owners and failing and succeeding. Right now, 800 locations globally. And so there you have a co-working space with all different kinds of pricing arrangements to help get you started. So to kind of wrap this up a little bit today, I'd like to suggest that entrepreneurship practiced ethically and empathetically means freedom. I've heard this from my colleagues in Ukraine, in particular, Professor Ihor Katerniak, whom I've known since the 90s when he first came to Evanston, Illinois, when I was working in business incubation at Northwestern University. And I've been talking to him where he sits most of the time in his basement during the air raid sirens in Lviv. He's a professor at Lviv University. And he told me, as well as some of my students just a week ago, that entrepreneurship means freedom. And I've added to that I think entrepreneurship practiced ethically and empathetically means freedom. It brings financial wealth, and you can define wealth as you like, but it brings self-determination and a kind of freedom in that way. It brings fulfillment without fear, and it allows escaping difficult situations, whether it's an economic crisis, conflict, pandemics. Entrepreneurship helps you to make a positive contribution to your community, make meaning by making the world a better place. I'd like to thank you for listening tonight. I'm happy to take some questions, and you can reach out to me at any time. I'll wait online to see if anybody has any questions to make, and thanks for listening. Okay, I'm seeing a question here. Do you have resources, website, books you can recommend for this? Oh, there are lots and lots of books and resources. There are a few on one of the earlier slides. I can put you back to that one just a little bit. Sorry, I don't have that linked up so that you can see it, but let's go back to that one. A number of interesting texts. Well, sorry guys, I can't get that to you as quickly. There we go. There are a number of textbook style books, but you can find these going into a public library where there are some wonderful sources. And so don't forget that the public library exists online and offline. You can go to Amazon, certainly, and to half price books marketplace online and look at texts that have to do with going global, global entrepreneur. The 60-minute startup has some nice examples of being not only agile but going global. There is a text here on franchising going global. I didn't talk too much about franchising, but that's an interesting opportunity. And in franchise lists in your own country, you can also go to a site of a franchisee, see what their intents are, and if they're ready to step over a border, that might be a route that you feel you have a company that has your back a bit, and they've done the screening, and they'll help you start somewhere else. And you can also then partner perhaps with someone in another part of the world as well. Or you can open a franchise from another part of the world in your own country. So those are interesting ways simply to make those connections and those global connections. I realized when I went probably global as an adult and not just as a child is happened really when I was still at Northwestern University. And in 1998, I was contacted by a company in London that had spun out of KPMG and was their technology commercialization practice. And Angle Technology, as it was called then, was looking to start up their company after just 4 years in London in the United States. And so Angle Technology reached out to me to start up their subsidiary. Now, at the time, I didn't really think of that as going global because I was opening up for them. So them became me, and I became a part of a company that went global. And that's often the way to think about it. You look for a partner who can help you establish in another part of the world and go from there. And then you have somebody on the ground who understands the climate, the business climate and the regulations and so on. And again, the place to go in the word of mouth are these business incubators, startup environments, economic development offices, investment promotion agencies. So hope that answers your question. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm reading the chat. Well, what? How do they get a hold of me? I'll go back all the way to that last slide. And while I'm thinking about that and going global, and I say don't get in, you have to watch this mentor whiplash and advice. I can say when I started my first business in Sweden, oops, could have gone that way. When I started my first business in Sweden, and I went to the bank to file a lot of papers and get identity cards and all kinds of things because I was on the equivalent of a green card, permanent visa, and good for a couple of years initially. And I was there working and starting my own company called Transmera, starting in, what was that, 2002. The bank, I won't say the name of it, but they were giving me advice that they suggested I not necessarily repeat, but I take on board, that if I were to incorporate the business in Ireland instead of in Sweden, because of the regulations and opportunities in Ireland as a part of the European Union and their own economic development reformations, coming out of an economic crisis for them in 2001. Well, we were all coming out of a dot-com burst. But they said if I were to incorporate there, bring the money into bank in Ireland, and then according to the EU, I could transfer that money essentially tax-free. So the taxes were extremely low to non-existent in Ireland. I could take the money in and then move it into my bank account in Sweden and earn money without paying taxes. And I thought about that. And I thought, well, it's legal, it's a loophole. And then I thought, probably a bit like a woman. This is about women's entrepreneurship. I said, that sounds like a bit of a hassle. And as much as I could get for a moment into what might be a kind of often male perspective, oh my gosh, I can tell everybody, isn't that cool? Look what I'm doing. And it's complex and it's interesting. No, it is. It's interesting and it's complex. It's on the edge of maybe unethical. Taxes are pretty important to help infrastructures and support people. And so I decided no. And you may get that kind of information and, follow the moral compass. But you hear all kinds of things going into business abroad in different cultures.